CA Kunjal Mehta, Advocate Deepesh Shakwala and CA Piyush Panchal to kindly assemble near the stage. Request Advocate Harish Shah, member of AGFTC and ITBA, and CA Purushottam Khandelwal, co-chairman of conference, to escort our eminent speaker, Sir Senior Advocate Tushar Hemani, along with the other dignitaries, Advocate Vasant Patel, Advocate K.H. Kathria, Advocate Sunil Shah, CA Kunjal Mehta, Advocate Deepesh Shakwala, and CA Piyush Panchal onto the dais. Let me take this opportunity to brief you all about Senior Advocate Tushar Hemani, sir. Sir is one of the youngest at bar to have been conferred senior designation by the Gujarat High Court in 2019. He is also the president of Income Tax Appellate Tribunal Bar Association, Ahmedabad, for the term 2015 to 2017. Sir has been a regular speaker at various conferences, seminars, meetings of varied professional bodies on diverse issues in the field of taxation and corporate laws. A regular writer of columns, articles, and papers for professional journals and conferences, visiting faculty at various institutes, universities, college management, and law school on the subjects of taxation and corporate laws. Sir has these and many more achievements to his credit. Sir, we are honored to have you amongst us today. I extend a formal welcome to Sir, and I request Advocate Harish Shah, sir, to welcome him with a book. Harish Shah, sir, has been the past president of the association. Thank you so much, sir. I now request CA Purushottam Khandelwal, co-chairman conference, to come forward and welcome Senior Advocate Tushar Hemani, sir, with a memento as a token of gratitude. Thank you so much, sir. Senior Advocate Tushar Hemani, sir, I humbly request you to come forward and enlighten us.
Organizers and friends, a very good morning to all of you. This has been a regular feature. In fact, I was also trying to recollect that every year, 4th and 5th, this conclave is there, and I'm also here almost on all those past 3 to 4 years occasions. So this time around we were discussing as to what should be the topic so as to keep everyone interested. Because if we pick up some technical topic, probably those who are having active matters on those issues would be interested. And those who do not have matters concerning that topic probably would not be interested. Page down thi thashe na, slide change. So we picked up a topic which is, more of future of tax litigation, because then everyone is into tax litigation. Broadly, people like us who are exclusively into litigation. Some of you sitting here probably would be into compliances as well as tax litigation. But then litigation affects all of us. And we all would like to know as to what is the future of tax litigation. So we decided to discuss something on future of tax litigation. Then in the process we realized that tax litigation as we see today probably is undergoing a sea change in the days to come because of faceless and E-Proceedings scenario. So we incorporated that also into the presentation. Once we incorporated that, then we realized that the best way to predict future is to learn our history. Unless we learn the history, we can't reasonably predict the future. And therefore, we incorporated the tax jurisprudence also. So this is how what we are going to discuss till 12 o'clock, time allotted to me. That what is tax jurisprudence? Once we understand that tax jurisprudence is with regard to the constitutionality of the taxation laws, the tools of interpretation of taxation laws, the basis of tax jurisprudence is principles of natural justice. Then we'll try to learn as regards what are the changes which are being brought by way of faceless system, by way of e-proceedings. And with these two in mind, we'll try to predict the future as to what is it that is going to affect us, all of us, in a big or small way in days to come. So this is how we are going to discuss in next 1 hour. With this backdrop, let us try to look at the tax jurisprudence. And why do I keep saying tax jurisprudence? Because jurisprudence is a generic idea. It concerns all branches of law, civil, criminal, and the countries who have written constitution. The basis of jurisprudence is the constitution. However, when we are dealing only with taxation laws, we are not concerned with the normal jurisprudence. We are concerned only with the tax jurisprudence. And tax jurisprudence, mind you, is something different than normal jurisprudence. Maybe under Civil Procedure Code, there are large number of technicalities. When we run a trial before a trial court, there are large number of bylaws, Evidence Act, in what manner evidences can be brought into the courtroom, in what way we can take cognizance of those evidences. Everything is highly technical. Whereas when we come to the tax laws, there are some areas which are highly technical. There are some areas which are informal, if I can use that term. In a court of law, namely a trial court, tribunal, we can simply hand over a piece of paper to the judges listening to the matter, and there would not be any objection or technical violation of any laws. So tax jurisprudence, friends, is different. What is the tax jurisprudence? Look, the first and the foremost, in fact, Justice Bela Trivedi in the morning session just touched upon that aspect as regards Article 265. Article 265 is with respect to levy of tax, collection of tax without the authority of law. The article says that no tax can be collected or levied without due authority of law. So that is the genesis for the purpose of levy of tax. So that is an enabling provision in the Constitution which would enable the government, when I say government, both state as well as central government, to levy tax on its citizens. Then comes Article 246. 246, basically it tells the authorities that these taxes can be collected by the central government, these taxes can be collected by the state government. So it is basically nothing but a bifurcation, broad bifurcation, where the union list is there as list 1, where there is a state list which is for the state governments, that is 2, and concurrent list which is combined for state as well as the central. We are concerned only with the first part, namely the union list. Then there is an entry 82 in the union list which empowers the central government to levy taxes on the income. So this is how the tax structure is here in our country. Then there are certain fundamental rights which are guaranteed under the Constitution: right to equality under Article 14, right to carry on the trade or profession with full freedom under Article 19, of course with reasonable restrictions under 19 subsection 6. Now these articles, they come handy, they can be put into the service when we find that a particular law is not falling within 4 corners of the Constitution. So supposing there is a law which says that we will levy tax on a presumptive basis, and that presumptive basis is under section 52 of the Income Tax Act, if I can go back to KP Varghese case, that you have entered into a transaction of purchase of a property during those days, there was no enabling provision like 50C that we have today in the present day. The question arose before the Supreme Court was that can there be a presumptive receipt of consideration? Even if you have received consideration of 100, can the authorities presume that no, you have received a consideration of 500 because we go by this particular valuation? The Supreme Court said that this cannot be done. This is in violation of Article 14 because this is a provision which is manifestly arbitrary. So that is how the courts normally, the experience is that normally courts do not go after the parliament when the law is enacted. However, in a given situation, one can argue that my fundamental rights are violated, and once the fundamental rights are violated, one can challenge the constitutionality of a particular provision to levy the tax. Article 19, in fact, there is a present, in fact, Monday, the final hearing of the matter is taking place where Gujarat High Court is concerned with an issue as regards the constitutionality of 115 BBE. 115 BBE, all of us are aware that that was a piece of legislation which came into the statute book with effect from 13, and in the year 2016, it was amended, further amended, so as to increase the rate of tax to 60% on the addition which are made under provisions of section 68 and 69. The constitutionality is challenged before the Gujarat High Court, and one of the facets of the argument is that this is in violation to Article 19. The argument is that the provision is confiscatory in as much as even if you enter into a cash sales, namely turnover of rupees 100, the revenue authorities would say that no, this is not your turnover, this is income under section 68 under the heads of cash credit, 83% tax, that is 77% taxes plus 10% penalty, along with interest, etc. So if you generate a turnover of rupees 100, the demand would be in excess of rupees 100. And that is how the argument as regards the confiscatory powers of the government, that the government does not want you to carry on any business. If you generate turnover of 100, government will recover 101 rupee from you. So do not carry on your trade, do not deal into cash sales. And High Court is seized of the matter, but I am just giving you an example that how the articles which guarantee fundamental rights to the citizen can be pressed into service for the purpose of dealing with the constitutionality of a taxing statute. Constitutional remedies, we are all aware that if we are aggrieved with a particular order, if we are aggrieved with a particular notice, if we are aggrieved with a particular action, or we are aggrieved with inaction on the part of the revenue authorities, we can always go to the constitutional court, namely the High Court, by filing a writ petition. Reopening notice is issued without jurisdiction. We approach the High Court. High Court can look into that aspect, whether notice is legal or illegal. A recovery notice is issued. Commissioner is not granting you stay. We can approach the High Court and point out our difficulties. High Court can intervene in that matter. Our refund application is pending since last many years. Department is not looking into that refund application at all, not giving us the refund which is legitimately due to us. We go and knock the doors of the court and tell the court that, sir, this is what is happening. So any action or inaction on the part of the authorities can entitle us to approach the constitutional courts, and those are constitutional remedies. Under Article 226, we have those constitutional remedies. There are various kinds of writs. However, due to paucity of time, probably we may not be in a position to go through them. But all that I am indicating as of now is that these are the facets of tax jurisprudence. These are facets where Constitution itself has certain inbuilt provisions, certain inbuilt articles which would preserve the proper taxation system in the country. Then we have Article 20. Though Article 20 is in the context of criminal procedure, nonetheless, the same is applicable even while dealing with a taxing statute. So if a particular taxing statute is made retrospectively applicable, then one can argue that, sir, you can't bring in a provision which is retrospective in nature and tax me for a transaction which has already taken place prior to this amendment being brought into the statute book. So Article 20 would safeguard that position. Let me at this stage slightly deviate, because many a times I keep hearing that a provision is retrospective in nature, a provision is retroactive in nature. Is there any difference between the two? Because many jurisprudence across the globe, there are certain European countries where these two terms, retrospective amendment and retroactive amendment, they are both used interchangeably. However, insofar as India is concerned, we have two different meaning assigned to these two different terminologies. What is a retrospective amendment? Because every time some amendment is brought into the statute book, people will say that this is retrospective, like 115 BBE. The argument is that the amendment was brought in the statute book on 15th December 2016, where most part of the previous year was already over. From 15th December, they said that no, instead of 30% tax, you will now have to pay 60% tax in case if any addition is made under 68 or 69, with effect from 1st April 2017. So, by the time the amendment was brought into the statute book, the part of the period previous year was already over, where the taxing events have already taken place. So, what is retrospective? Let me give you two examples to put across this point so that you can understand, and then we'll go to retroactive immediately. Retrospective is, suppose today they bring in an amendment with effect from 1st April 2022, that those who have been raided, those assessees who have been raided, will have to pay taxes on the long-term capital gain dealing into shares and securities at the normal rate and not at a concessional rate which is prescribed under the statute book. Mind you, the law is with effect from 1st April 2022. However, if I am raided in 2010, then also I will lose the benefit of enjoying that concessional rate of tax, because from 1st April, whatever capital gain that I have by dealing into the floor of the stock market, long-term capital gain will be taxed at a normal rate. So, this is an example of a prospective amendment. Now, let me slightly twist this. They say that those who have been raided in the past, however, with effect from 1/4/2017, this benefit will go away. So, between 1/4/2017 and the date of the amendment, that is 1st April 2022, if you have already shown a capital gain of dealing into the securities and paid less amount of taxes, that would be taken away from you. So, you will have to pay the taxes at the normal rate for 17-18, 18-19, 19-20, 20-21 and 21-22. For all these years, if you have shown the income under the head capital gains by dealing into securities, earlier it was nil, later on it became 10%. However, now the law says that even if you are raided in 2010, 12, 15, so long as you are raided, you will have to pay taxes at a higher rate. So, this is retrospective, because the day on which I carried out the transaction, namely sometime in 17 or 18 or 19, I did not know that my rate is going to undergo a change at a later stage, and I will be called upon to pay taxes at a higher rate by a retrospective amendment. So, this is retrospective. Now, what is retroactive as against this? Look, retroactive is you do not tinker with the tax laws. However, by way of a deeming fiction or by way of an amendment, you change the factual scenario. So, to give you an example, probably that example is there in Palkhiwala's book also, and it's a classic example. Every court probably would be concerned with this example. That supposing today lawyers do not pay GST. Chartered accountants pay GST. The law is amended with effect from 1/4/2017, where a simple explanation is added that for the purpose of GST, all lawyers would be deemed to be treated as chartered accountants. If this amendment is brought into the statute book, then it's a retroactive amendment, in as much as the tax rate structure, nothing is changed. However, a factual presumption is added into the statute book with effect from retroactively 1/4/2017 or 1/7/2017, that all lawyers would be treated as chartered accountant for the purpose of GST Act. So therefore, all lawyers, people like us, we are not levied with GST because we don't provide services. Unlike chartered accountant friends who really provide services, we always create problems for the clients. So therefore, lawyers, they don't provide services. Nonetheless, would be treated as chartered accountant, and that factual presumption is undergoing change. No change in the tax laws. However, there is a retroactive application of a factual scenario, and because of that, I am now exposed to taxation. So that is retroactive. And in India, both terms are not interchangeable. Both are used separately. Article 20 says that no law can be amended retrospectively so as to penalize someone for an act when it was committed. There was no such law treating that act as an illegal act. So that again is a safeguard which is there. However, we see large number of retrospective amendments, and that falls within the competence of the Parliament. We don't challenge those retrospective amendments unless we find that a substantive levy is being there in the statutory scheme so as to expose someone for the past transactions. There are 4 ingredients which are essential for the purpose of applying any tax law. The first is subject of tax. Subject of tax is the SSEs, the class which is defined. Second is persons liable to pay the tax. So if you have generated income, you are liable to pay tax. If you have generated less than threshold limit, let's say 1.5 lakhs rupees you have won, you are not liable to pay tax. The rate of taxation, that is ultimately 30%, 35%, 42.75 probably is the highest, and the value on which the rate is to be applied. What the quantum, the measure, because unless that item falls in the definition of income, it will not become income, and therefore there is no question of levy of any tax. So these are broadly the 4 classes, the 4 components which would be used for the purpose of levy of the tax. Then broad principles of interpretation. When we are dealing with taxing statute, because many a times we get confused that how do we interpret a particular provision. So these are the principles of interpretation which are exclusive to the taxing laws. They are not to be used for some other branch of law. If a particular provision under the civil laws is to be interpreted, then these tools of interpretation would not come handy. These are all specific to taxing statute. First is literal interpretation. If the section is clear, if there is no ambiguity, if the language is clear, you go by the language. You don't add anything, you don't subtract anything, you don't make any word redundant. You just go by the plain language, and whatever is the meaning of that plain language statutory provision, you adopt that meaning. Strict interpretation. There are 2 ways in which one can interpret the provision. One is when it comes to the levy of tax. The law is very clear that unless there is a specific provision enabling the Parliament to levy the tax, the court would read those provisions in favor of the SSEs. So the levy, when it comes to interpreting a particular taxing provision, creating a liability, the court would be strict with its interpretation. Conversely, whenever there is any incentive, any benefit which is sought to be given to an SSE, the interpretation would be liberal in as much as if at all there is any doubt, that doubt would be held in favor of the SSE. So these are 2 sides of the very same coin. Other contextual meaning is you pick up the context, you pick up the purpose, why a particular act is brought into the statute book, and then you try to interpret that as against the literal meaning. Namely, if you read the text, probably the meaning is something different. If you look at the actual purpose of that particular section, then the purpose is different. Again, coming back to 115 BBE, if you look at the section says that anything added under 68-69 would be taxed at 30%, 60%. No expenditure, no losses. It will be on a standalone basis. The entire section says that 68-69 addition would be ring fenced. It will be protected from all other additions, all other items of income in your return of income. That is in so far as the reading of the section as appearing in the statute book. Now, if you look at the memorandum explaining the provisions of the finance bill, if you look at the intention of the Parliament in introducing this 2016 amendment where 30% rate was increased to 60%, you would find that the main purpose is that the Parliament has introduced a scheme of demonetization. In the scheme of demonetization, Parliament expected that there would be large number of citizens who would be depositing cash available with them. And in that process, they apprehended that there could be black money entering into the legal banking channel. In order to tax that black money, which is coming by way of deposit of old denomination notes, 500 and 1000 rupee notes, they said that we are increasing the rate from 30% to 60%. So if I give the literal meaning is that now onwards, henceforth, every edition under 68 and 69 would be taxed at the rate of 60%. So even if there is a survey and there is some undisclosed stock which is found out at a later stage today, which would be added under 69, again that would be taxed at 60% because that is what the plain language suggests. However, if I look at the intention of the Parliament, I find that Parliament's intention was to tax me for that demonetization period. That period was from 8th of November, 12 o'clock, that is 9th November, till 30th of December, because that was the window during which I could deposit the money into the bank account. Now, that intention and the contextual meaning, the textual meaning of the section is different. Intention was to curb the generation of black money during demonetization period. However, the literal meaning, the textual meaning is to tax all kinds of transactions for all time to come under 68 and 69 at the rate of 60%. So, how do we interpret this section? Then the mechanism which is provided is that if the contextual meaning leads to a conclusion which is different from the intendment of the Parliament, then one can look into the intendment of the Parliament, one can look into the intention of the Parliament and try to interpret the provision so as to make sense out of it. Because ultimately, if we say that all 68 and 69 editions, 69 A, B, C, D, would ultimately result into 60% tax for all times to come, is something which is draconian. And therefore, that can never be the intention of the Parliament. And therefore, we have to go with the actual intention of the Parliament. So, this is how the word of interpretation, the world, it moves in this manner. Then we have a mischief rule. Mischief rule is, the classic example is 43B amendment. Those who have practiced during 87 and 89, they would remember that 43B amendment was brought into the statute book at a much later date. And the argument was that can you apply this retrospectively or no? Chandulal Venichand, the Gujarat High Court judgment, eventually confirmed by Allied Motors, Supreme Court. The argument was this mischief rule, that the amendment was brought into the statute book to remove a difficulty. The difficulty was that even if you make a payment before the due date of filing of return, after the previous year is over, but before the due date of filing of return, for a particular statutory liability, you would lose the deduction of that liability in that year. Revenue says that yes, we accept that mistake, we are now amending the law. Now the mistake was very much, it was read at large, it was written on the provision itself. Mistake is now sought to be rectified. The question is, once you rectify the mistake, can it relate back to the origin of the section or only from the date on which mistake is actually rectified? That is where the mischief rule comes into play. Mischief rule says that yes, whenever there is a removal of a difficulty, whenever there is a mischief which was there in the statutory provision and it is sought to be removed by the Parliament, it has to be given a retrospective effect and it must benefit who have suffered because of this mistake. We have judgments of Supreme Court, we have judgments of Gujarat High Court on that. Then harmonious construction. Once we are constructing a particular provision, you don't look at that provision in isolation. You have to look at the entire scheme of the Act. By interpreting a provision in a particular manner, you don't make other provisions of the Act redundant. So it has to be harmonious construction. Beneficial interpretation, I have already covered that. Casus omissus. Casus omissus is that while reading a section, the court cannot supply a particular word or a particular meaning which is not actually flowing from reading of that particular provision. So, court cannot add words to the section. Simultaneously, court cannot ignore the words which are there in the statute book. The presumption is that Parliament is supreme, Parliament knows everything, Therefore, any word which is written in the section cannot be ignored. At the same time, any word which is not written in the statutory provision cannot be supplied so as to make a different meaning, so as to give it a different color than what was intended by the Parliament. Then we have again a law which says that provisions, whether even if they are meant to be mandatory provisions, can it be read as a directory provision? The classic example is audit report, filing of audit report along with various deductions, or in case of a trust, the filing of audit report under form 10B along with the return of income. Supposing you miss out on that, the section is very categorical that you have to file, the audit report shall be filed along with the return of income in the form 10B. Supposing you do not file that along with the return of income, the question would be that is it so fatal, is it so mandatory that you lose the exemption under 11 for all times to come? Then the courts have taken the view that under such a circumstances, even if the language uses the terminology shall, the shall can be read as may, and we have to look at it as a directory provision rather than the mandatory provision. Then we can look at the machinery and procedural provisions. When we are interpreting machinery and procedural provisions, they play a very vital role. If there is a taxing statute, there is a charging statute, however, there is no machinery for the purpose of computation of that charge, or the machinery provision fails in a particular situation, then there is no question of levy of tax. The classic example is Bishi Srinivasa Setti. In the context of goodwill, when the cost of acquisition is nil, the machinery provision fails because you have the consideration, but you do not have the cost of acquisition, and therefore you can't find out what is the capital gain. Once you don't find out what is capital gain, then there is no question of charging that capital gain to tax. So machinery provision or absence thereof would again make the particular section unworkable, and in such a circumstances, no taxes can be levied. Simultaneously, if at all any procedural provisions are there, then those procedural provisions have to be read in conjunction with the main charging section, and procedural provisions cannot override the charging section. So the power flows from charging to procedural and not in a reverse manner. Limitation period, if at all a particular limitation is provided, then that has to be interpreted strictly, and therefore if the law says that within 30 days time you have to prefer the first appeal, and if you don't prefer the appeal within 30 days time, then you have to explain. If you have good and sufficient reason for condonation of delay would be condoned. However, when it comes to interpreting those provisions, if you say that sir bhul thei gayi, hu bhuli gyo ane 10 દિવસ થઈ ગયા વધારે, that is not sufficient. So limitation provisions have to be strictly construed when it comes to taxing statute. Legal fiction or a deeming provision, they are confined to the presumption which is required for the purpose of implementing that tax laws. So the deeming provision or a legal fiction has a very limited role, and that cannot be expanded. If a particular credit is to be deemed as 68 credit, then that deeming fiction will operate within the four corners of the provision itself. It cannot have a larger meaning or a general meaning. Then legal provisions, appeal and refund provisions. Yes, appeal and refund provisions. Again, appeal provisions, appeal is a right which is a statutory right. It's not an inherent right. So you cannot say that any order, any direction can be challenged in appeal unless the law provides. You can't challenge a particular order. So appeal is a creation of statutory provisions. You do not have a legal right of appeal unless the law provides for such an appeal. So 264 is one order where there is no provision of any appeal. So therefore 264, the only remedy is writ remedy, that is under Article 226 of Constitution. You can't take 264 orders into further appeal. And then we have, yes, there are certain external aids available for the purpose of interpreting a particular statute. External aids are that you look at the legislative history, you look at the background of that section, you consider the board circulars, board instructions, the FM, finance minister's speech given on the floor of the parliament, you look at the parliamentary material, namely the notes on clauses, the memorandum explaining the provisions of the finance bill, so as to find out that why such a provision is brought into the statute book in the first place. So these are external aids. You look at the previous judicial judgments on that issue when you are interpreting a particular provision. You look at the statutes and subsequent amendments also. You look at the directory meaning of that. Supposing there is a provision as regards, I gave an example earlier, that the provision is confiscatory. Now, confiscatory word is not defined under the Income Tax Act. You have to go with the external aid. Now, what is that external aid? Either you can look into the judgments which have considered the word confiscatory and try to find a meaning from reading of those judgments, or you look at a law dictionary, namely a Black's dictionary or Oxford Law Dictionary, and you try to find out what is the meaning of confiscatory. And that is how you can develop a particular word or a particular phrase which is given in the texting statute. There are internal aids also. Internal aids are provisos, explanations, the non-obstantive clause or marginal notes and headings, or a punctuation. All this would collectively help you in interpreting a particular provision. Let's say marginal notes. Gujarat High Court was concerned with interpreting the provisions of 153C. In the case of Anil Kumar Agrawal, the High Court said, the argument before the High Court was that 153C provision is a search-centric provision, and therefore the date of search would determine as to which law would be made applicable, whether the law which is in existence on the date of search would be applied to that case, or the law as existing into the statute books when the assessing officer issues notice under 153C would apply. So, court, while interpreting the provision, court took note of the heading of the section. Court said that 153C, the heading is search-related assessments. And if the heading is search-related assessment, it has to be treated as a search-centric provision. So, court picked up something from reading the heading of the section. So, these are internal aids. Retrospective, I have already covered. General presumption is every law is presumed to be prospective unless stated otherwise. So, every law applies with a forward date, because as the saying goes, that law always looks forward, it never looks backward. So, law is always forward looking, and the presumption is that all laws, all amendments are all prospective in nature unless the contrary indication is there in the Finance Bill or Finance Act itself. We have a Constitution Bench judgment in the form of Vatika Township. I have given the citation 367 ITR 466, where this aspect is beautifully explained. It's a 5 judges Constitution Bench, and therefore one can rely on this, that if at all any section is sought to be applied retrospectively, one can argue that that is not correct, unless, of course, I put this qualification, that unless, of course, it is mentioned in the effective date along with the finance bill that this law applies retrospectively. And in a given case, even that retrospectivity also can be a subject matter of challenge before the court. Now, I have part B, the taxing jurisprudence part B. Look, part A, what we discussed so far was a fundamental of interpreting any taxing statute. Those fundamentals would remain as it is. There is not going to be any change. Even if now the justice delivery system is in the form of E-mode or in the form of faceless mode, there is not going to be change insofar as the tax laws are concerned. Those fundamentals would remain as it is. Part B, there are 2 fundamentals which are now undergoing change. Those fundamentals are principles of natural justice. The way in which we look at principles of natural justice is now going to undergo a change. It's now going to undergo a sea change, I would say. And in what manner? Let's look at what is principle of natural justice. Principle of natural justice is, in fact, there is no written law insofar as principles of natural justice is concerned. We do not have any provision under the Income Tax Act which says that principles of natural justice are required to be followed. Even there is no codification of principles of natural justice. We do not have any other statute, neither the Constitution nor under any law, where the principles of natural justice are defined. In fact, this is so natural during old days. This is how the principles of natural justice has evolved over a period of time. That without hearing someone, without knowing both the sides properly, you can't deliver justice in a normal parlance. And therefore, naturally, if someone wants to deliver justice, then these are the principles which are basis for justice delivery system. And that is how the terminology natural justice, that naturally you would do this, at least this much is required to be done. So that is how the natural justice had evolved over a period of time. Earlier, there were only two facets. One was unbiased approach originally. And second is autem partem, namely you must give an opportunity of hearing before deciding anybody's case. So unbiased and opportunity of hearing, those were the only two facets. Thereafter, over a period of time, courts developed the third aspect in the matter, and that was that even the order must be speaking order. If you pass an order which is a cursory order, which is not dealing with any of the contentions, maybe in favor, against, but if an order lacks reasons, then that order is bad in law. It is in violation of principles of natural justice. So this was the third facet which was added to the principles of natural justice. So what we have today is all the authorities, namely if I start with the assessing authority is a judge and prosecutor combined together, a deadly combination for that matter, and he would be acting at times as a judge, at times as a prosecutor, and ultimately he passes the order. Commissioner of Income Tax appeals, the appellate jurisdiction, purely a judicial forum, and therefore principles of natural justice are of paramount importance. Then we have the tribunal, we have the High Court, we have the Supreme Court. All these forums, before all these authorities, what is required to be done is this. First is, his action must be unbiased. If you find that he is acting with a bias, then probably that is the first sign that your principles of natural justice are being violated. So if the show cause notice is like, I would like to add so and so, so and so, so and so to your total income. If you want to say anything, you come forward. If you don't want to say, then the order would be delivered to you within next 24 hours. Then probably you can argue that, sir, this is a biased notice because you already made up your mind. You first call for the explanation. That, sir, what is your explanation as regards this particular entry? Once I give the explanation, then you counter me on the explanation. Ultimately, after doing that, you can say that, no, now I want to make an addition insofar as these transactions are concerned. You are, in the first instance itself, you are saying that I want to make an addition within 2-3 days, reply or face the consequences. It's a biased state of mind. Second is notice. I must be put to notice for whatever crime that I have committed. So if you do not tell me, you have entered into transaction with some broker, some entry provider, some person of a dubious character, and according to our record, your transactions run into 170 lakhs. We want to make an addition insofar as that 170 lakhs is concerned. If you want to submit anything, you come forward, otherwise we make an addition. Now, which party, what checks, in what manner the transactions have taken place, on what dates, under what nomenclature, if you do not give any of this information, how do I respond to that? Therefore, the notice plays an important part. Notice is like you would be told in black and white that, sir, these are your allegations against you, these are your crimes, if I can call them, and we want to take action because of ABC reasons. So there has to be a proper notice. Once you receive the notice, the least that you could expect from the authorities is a proper time granted to you to respond to that notice. Because what we have seen so far is that there are faceless regime where you are given 24 hours time, 48 hours time, 36 hours time, as if it is some sort of a game where your time starts now. પેલો અમિતાભ બચ્ચનની આવે ને જે કે 30 સેકન્ડમાં જવાબ આપો, 60 સેકન્ડમાં જવાબ આપો. And what they do is, I am told, I don't practice on the original side, but I am told by large number of consultants that what they do is they upload the notice at 11 o'clock in the night. So nobody is live looking at the portal at 11 o'clock in the night. So next day when you come to the office at around 10 o'clock, open your computer, log into that client's portal, and you realize that, oh, one day has already gone. So you effectively get 2 days, 3 days time. Look, this is not some sort of a speed game where the speed would decide the result. This is a game or a proceeding where you have to be given sufficient time so as to respond along with documentary evidences so that you can make out a case. Ultimately, it is not that we caught you and now we want to kill you. It's never that. It is always that, sir, we have a case against you. If you have a good enough explanation, we'll let you go. Otherwise, we'll tax you on that transaction. So reasonable opportunity of responding to that. Personal hearing. This is one area which is going to create the maximum problem. Personal hearing. What is the meaning of personal hearing? If we look at the terminology, audi alteram partem proceeds on this, that you should not be condemned unheard. So if someone wants to punish me, at least that person has to tell me that, sir, this is your crime, and for this crime we want to punish you like this. Without giving me an opportunity of putting across my version of truth, if I am condemned, if I am taxed, then that is not granting me opportunity. And opportunity, as the law says, that it should be given in a proper manner. It should not be an eyewash, that within 24 hours if you want to say something, otherwise I have already made up my mind. Whatever that you want to say, I'll reproduce in the order. Addition will follow. That is not opportunity of hearing. Opportunity of hearing, we need fresh mind, we need an open mind, so that my point of view can be considered by the authorities. So far what we have seen is, in the physical hearing, you go before the assessing authority, you put across your point, you convince that authority in whatever best manner that you could, and ultimately that authority passes the order. Now imagine a faceless scenario. Faceless scenario, we do not know who is going to ultimately pass the order. So the person who is hearing you is not the person who is ultimately going to pass the order. So what is the effect of that personal hearing? Today, as the faceless scheme stands today, with effect from 1/4/2022, the new faceless scheme, which has now come into the statute book in the form of Finance Bill 2022, the opportunity of personal hearing is now a must. Now the language says that there is no option available with the authorities to deny you that opportunity. The moment you ask for it, it is required to be granted to you. But how far that personal hearing is going to be effective? Because personal hearing, supposing if somebody tells me that, sir, you have to argue the matter before ABC and your judgment is going to pass by a bench of some different judges, I am very sure that I will not be effective, because I put across my point to somebody. I do not even know whether that person has understood it, because he is not opening his mind. His job is just to listen to you, sit across the screen, and whatever that you say, he will pass on that recorded clip to somebody else. So he is neither questioning you, he is neither counter questioning you, he is neither asking for any clarification nor telling you to explain a point in a greater detail. So it's like a monologue. You go before a wall, you make your presentation. It's like YouTube video where you speak in front of a screen and then leave rest to the imagination of the person who are viewing you. So what is the significance then insofar as personal hearing is concerned? In my opinion, in my reading, personal hearing would be very soon a matter of past. Maybe you can ask for a personal hearing, and if you look at definition of 2(23)(c), hearing is now defined with effect from 2016. Hearing is defined under the scheme of the Act. Personal hearing means you can upload the submission, because now the definition of hearing also includes written submission and written arguments. So the way in which we conventionally understand personal hearing is you go in person, you talk to somebody, and that person would in an interactive manner put questions to you back, and then you can put across your point, explain the intricacies involved in your case to that authority. That is something which is going to be a thing of the past, because no person who is hearing you is going to pass the ultimate order. Even that order, even if that person has already passed, he is the same one who has to pass the order. He has to first pass a draft order. The draft order will go before some review committee. Some review committee will give its own findings. Then again the order would come back to the assessing unit. By that time the person who has originally heard you probably would not be there. And as a matter of rule, once it goes before the review committee and review committee makes certain suggestions, then it goes before a different assessment unit. It does not go back to the same unit because his order has now undergone a change in the review process. So effectively there is no personal hearing. Personal hearing is basically your monologue. Whatever that you want to say, instead of giving it in writing, you would be saying that in your own words before the screen. So therefore, natural justice and the foundation pillar of natural justice, namely personal hearing, in days to come is going to be a thing of the past. My advice is, it is better that you give everything in writing rather than relying on the personal opportunity of personal hearing, because personal hearing is nothing but an eyewash in the e-proceedings. Therefore, give everything in writing. Ultimately, supposing if the view is taken, I do not know how behind the scene things work in a faceless manner. If I am allowed to talk to the concerned person, I am told that many a times even that concerned person is not visible. His face is either blurred, or there is a wall which is there in front of the camera, which is there at the department's end side. Whatever that you want to say, you keep saying in a monologue manner. Now, whether the actual clip of an argument goes before the assessment unit or only the transcript of that submission goes before the actual assessment unit, I do not know how the system works. If the transcript goes, then it is all the more dangerous, because transcript always has the biases of the person who is recording the transcript. So if the person who is at the receiving end, who is listening to your arguments, oral arguments, if he notes down something in an incorrect manner, or if he notes down something out of context or in a manner which you do not want to canvass, then probably wrong thing would be conveyed to the ultimate assessment unit, and that would ultimately create more problems, and that clip would be played maybe at a later stage before the appellate authority or before the tribunal, can be used against you. It is therefore all the more reason better that you give everything in writing and forget about the opportunity of personal hearing. My reading is personal hearing is not something which is going to give you practical results. And last is a speaking order. Again, speaking order is still holding the field, and that is going to continue. So insofar as the principle of natural justice are concerned, first is that whether you get all the evidences or no. That is one area where I have doubts, because the system is that they can communicate with you anytime they want to. They can issue notices, call upon you to place on record evidences, explanation, etc. But the reverse is not true. We can't communicate with the authorities as and when we want. Take a case of commissioner appeals. In a faceless appeal mechanism, unless the commissioner issues a notice and opens the portal for you to make submissions, you on your own cannot go on the commissioner appeals portal and make a request even for early hearing. In fact, Gujarat High Court has recently taken a view that you can approach commissioner appeals for stay also. However, for the purpose of asking for stay, commissioner appeals needs to be there. Commissioner appeal itself is not there, because the procedure is that when your appeal is picked up for the hearing, it will be assigned to one commissioner. So long as that assignment does not take place, it is lying only with National Faceless Center. Now, National Faceless Center is an authority. It is not a human being. And therefore, even if you, let's say, there is no enabling portal, there is no enabling tab whereby you can address a letter to the commissioner appeals that kindly fix my matter for early hearing, kindly grant me stay, kindly grant me opportunity of cross-examination, kindly allow me to take copies of the documents which have been relied upon in the assessment order, or kindly grant me the statement of the person recorded during the course of the search proceedings, because AO has not granted me those statements but relied upon the same. You do not have the liberty of approaching the commissioners in the faceless mechanism unless under the new scheme, which has now come into the notified in December 2021, unless your case is assigned to a particular commissioner appeals. There is no assignment, there is no window which is open, and you can never approach the commissioner. So where is the question of then gathering the evidences, preparing yourself, preparing the written submissions in advance? No such things are possible. It will be done in a very precise manner. The moment you are issued a notice, you will be given 15 days time. In that 15 days time, you will have to prepare the written submission, give it to them. So the way the principles of natural justice will have to now undergo a sea change insofar as collection of evidences are concerned. Secondly, reasonable time. Again, it will be in a time-bound manner. Unlike CIT appeals here, physically, we would go collect the evidences, take time, again we'll approach, we say that sir, this calls for remand, you call for remand, remand proceedings would be sent. Everything would be done in a humane manner where people would appreciate your constraints also. I'm very sure that those things are again undergoing change. So reasonable time is one casualty, collection of evidences would be another, and the opportunity of personal hearing is the third casualty, which is going to create large number of problems. Day before yesterday, in fact, I was told by the president of the tribunal, Shri Pannu, probably he was here yesterday only, that there are 5 lakhs appeals which are pending before CIT appeals. And the instructions are that within next 6 months, those 5 lakhs appeals are going to be decided. So you can very well imagine in what manner and in what way those appeals are going to be decided. The litigation, the floodgates of litigations are going to be open in next 6 months, and CIT appeal is going to pass an order so as to enable the revenue to recover the remaining 80%, because most of the cases by payment of 20%, the stay is granted against the 80%. But once the appeals are decided, then the entire demand would get due and you will be exposed to the entire demand and payment thereof. Yes, the second would be the creation problem would be judicial precedent. Very briefly, what is judicial precedent? Judicial precedent is when a particular court or a particular authority has taken a view, then a subsequent court or a subsequent authority will have to respect the earlier judgments. There are large number of hierarchy issues that if Supreme Court judgments are there, it binds the entire India, and Supreme Court judgments, I do not see much of a problem. There are High Court judgments. High Court judgments broadly fall into 2 different categories. One is jurisdictional High Court judgment, another is non-jurisdictional High Court judgment. The problem in the faceless or a E-proceeding scenario is that what is jurisdictional? Because hitherto the law is Delhi High Court old judgment of Sheth Minalal, etc. The law is that wherever your assessing authority is situated, that is considered to be your jurisdiction. So even if you are staying in Mumbai, but your AO, because you filed the returns in Surat and your AO is in Surat, you will be considered as a taxpayer of Surat, namely Gujarat. And Gujarat would be your jurisdictional High Court. Now that is going to undergo again a change, because I do not know where my assessing authority is situated. I go with the physical assessing officer. Physical assessing officer has only 2 jobs. One, he has to dispose of, if at all reopening is there, he has to dispose of my reasons, and second, he has to effect the recoveries. Beyond that, he is not involved in the framing of the assessment at all. He would say that, sir, that is not my job. So the jurisdictional assessing officer only does this thing, and insofar as those aspects are concerned, you can rely on the jurisdictional High Court judgment. That, sir, you can't recover because ABC judgments, and he is bound by those judgments. However, if a law point arises and the assessment unit assigned to you is in Chennai, the review unit is sitting in Calcutta, and the final assessment order is going to be passed by someone sitting in Delhi, then what would be the jurisdictional High Court? And in what way you can say that, sir, Gujarat is my High Court and therefore you follow Gujarat High Court? If you do not follow, then either it will be a contempt of court or you are doing something which is against the settled law of the state. My reading again is that judicial precedents will have to be read in a different manner now. We'll have to go with the situs, the locus of the assessee rather than the assessing authority. And that law will have to evolve over a period of time. The law will evolve that it is the situs of the assessee which would determine what is the jurisdictional High Court. Insofar as the binding nature is concerned, look, before the assessing authority, there is not much of a problem, because assessing authority will note down the judgment And ultimately, they are not bound to follow that judgment for the simple reason that if they start following the judgment, then they can never challenge the finding. So they may note that, or they may note that yes, issue is covered by Gujarat High Court judgment. However, our SLP is pending against that Gujarat High Court judgment. Then therefore, in order to keep the issue alive, I am making the addition. And he is justified in doing so. However, when it comes to the matters before the Commissioner appeals, the problem would be that he is an appellate authority and he is bound by the judgment of the jurisdictional High Court. Now, the locus of Commissioner we do not know. Which Commissioner is going to be assigned to us? And the constitutional provisions are also very well settled that it is only the territorial jurisdiction which would be governed by the jurisdictional High Court. So, Gujarat cannot say that my law is applicable in someone sitting in Mumbai, even if that person falls outside my territorial jurisdiction, my law would apply to that person also. And therefore, CIT appeal matters would create a larger problem. It's so how the judicial precedents are required to be implemented. Take an example of tribunal. Tribunal, I am told that though the faceless provisions are there, over a period of time, tribunal is going into the boundaryless tribunal. That is, the faceless tribunal in the form of boundaryless tribunal, jurisdictional less tribunal. In as much as we might have a bench, suddenly at 10 o'clock in the morning, they will say that, sir, your matter is now going to be heard by someone sitting in Mumbai. So everything will remain as it is because everything is in e-form. Your appeal papers, your paper book, your revenue authorities, everyone is appearing in the e-form. Your matter would be heard by a division bench sitting in Mumbai. So I appear from the Gujarat, my SSC is in Gujarat, however the matter would be heard by Mumbai. They might say that, take an example of 3615A or 43B, Gujarat State Road Transport Corporation is against the Gujarat SSCs. However, Mumbai High Court is in favor. Can I then argue that, sir, forget Gujarat, because Gujarat, I am not arguing the matter in Gujarat, I am arguing the matter in Mumbai, and therefore you follow Mumbai High Court, ignore Gujarat, two views are there. View against me is of a non-jurisdictional High Court, view in my favor is of a jurisdictional High Court, therefore you follow Mumbai rather than Gujarat. Again, that is going to create a lot of problem. The way in which we apply judicial precedents with certainty is not going to be there. Let us make it slightly more interesting. In fact, I am told that the division bench could be constituted by someone sitting in Mumbai as well as Delhi. So a member would log in from Mumbai, accountant member, a judicial member would log in from Delhi, I would be arguing from Gujarat, and my DR, the counterpart, the revenue authority, he could be a DR arguing from Calcutta. Then how do we implement the judicial precedent? Again, that evolutionary process is going to be on, it is going to be there. My reading is that we'll have to go by the locus or the situs of the SSC and forget about all other settled principles. Eventually, that law will have to evolve. But that evolutionary process, we are all going to be part of that exciting process. Let me straightway go to, because most of the issues I have covered, I am not discussing. Yes, I have covered this, that opportunity of hearing is undergoing a change in the change scenario, because person passing the order and person hearing the arguments would be different. The law of precedent I have already covered, that CIT appeal, ITAT, we do not know who is going to ultimately hear the matter, who is answerable. Supposing there is a gross violation, the law is not at all, Gujarat High Court law is not at all followed. I want to file a writ petition. Whom do I make the respondent? National Faceless Center or the individuals who have passed the orders, namely the final authority, or a technical authority who has verified the record, or the assessment unit which has passed the original draft order, or the review unit which has made the substantial changes in that original draft. So ultimately, we do not know who is going to be answerable. Our simple answer from the revenue side could be that, sir, National Faceless Center is an authority which you recognize. However, National Faceless Center exists only in New Delhi, because if we go by the locus, then that is only in New Delhi. Then again the question would be that whether the New Delhi is going to be the High Court or Gujarat is going to be the High Court, because they would argue that, sir, the authority is in New Delhi, and therefore as per the settled law today, you go by the place where assessing officer is sitting and not by the place where SSC is sitting. So that again is going to be a problem. Appeal hearing, I have in fact covered all this, that interlocutory orders, how do we get stay, how do we get early hearing, how do we file written submissions in advance. All those issues are going to be there, and for that a mechanism has to be devised. The end effect is, the first is writs. The number of writs are going to increase like anything. In fact, High Court has already seen the influx. Every third order passed under the faceless mechanism, the assessment order, is now challenged before the High Court on the ground that there is a gross breach of principles of natural justice. This is again an evolutionary process where the new system is settling in. People are not sure how to approach the new system. Even the authorities are not sure how to implement the new system. And therefore, every time there is a problem, we approach the court. Court is also devising a method whereby they would also start laying down the missing links in the jigsaw puzzle. There are certain pictures which are missing, and court is providing those pictures, that you give reasonable time, you serve the draft assessment order in advance. Thereafter, whatever are the submissions, you incorporate those submissions in the final order. There is no sense in passing the same order which was served to you as a draft order, as a final order, and without considering even the submissions. You give opportunity of personal hearing. If at all the case is required to be referred to a valuation officer, you refer the matter to a valuation officer. So court is also very proactively considering this, but in the near future, my reading is that the writs are going to go up. So also the issues as regards the interpretation of the statute, because interpretation itself is based on large number of conventions which are settled. Since last more than 70 years, we have been citing those cases, we have been following those settled principles. Many of those settled principles are undergoing change, and therefore, writs would go up, the issues with respect to interpretation of the statutes will go up, and the complexity in the days to come will go up. The future of litigation, purely talking from a lawyer's point of view, looks very bright. It looks very positive. From an SSA's point of view, it looks extremely disturbing, and a picture is very gloom, because we are again going back into an arena of uncertainties. And as someone has said, that in the tax laws, what we want the most is the certainty. I don't mind paying 30, 40, 50% taxes. If you tell me in advance that, sir, taxes are going to be 50%, I'll arrange my affairs in such a way that I have to pay 50% to government, and I'll increase my fees, etc. in that way. However, after having carried out the transactions, if someone comes and tells me that, sir, now we have changed the rule of the game, and the game will have to be played in a different manner, though you have already played your part, but we'll now change the rule. That is something which hurts, and that is precisely what is going to happen in the days to come, because the settled law is now going to be once again resettled. But in that, I see a lot of bright prospects for youngsters. Look, every time there is a disturbance, there is an opportunity. So, opportunity is there in every adverse situation. Even the war between Russia and Ukraine has brought in large number of opportunities. You will find that there is a discount scheme going on in the stock market. Stocks which were earlier available is now on a discount sell. So those are available at 60%, 40% sell. So that is an opportunity. So people who are already settled, people like us, we are all TCS, Reliance of the stock market. Our shares in any case are high, but people who are struggling, those who are upcoming youngsters, those who have to establish themselves, this is a tremendous opportunity. You can develop your legal career in an uncertain situation like this, because every one of us is at a loss. We do not know what is going to happen tomorrow, how the laws are going to be implemented, because I claim to be knowing the system which was there prevalent in last 60 years. But now that system itself is undergoing change. Once that system is undergoing change, I would also be sitting at a learning stage. I would also be sent back to that stage where I have to relearn. The learning has to be done in a different manner, and there all of us would be sitting together, all of us would be at par, and that is where I see a lot of opportunity for youngsters, those who are in the early stages of their career. So these uncertainties in the form of redefining the laws would bring in lot of opportunities. With this, friends, I conclude my presentation within time allotted to me at 12 o'clock. If at all time permits, I can answer any question, or if at all it is over, then I am very much thankful to all of you for patient hearing and giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, sir. Your session highlighted pace, which made understanding better, not only for the beginners in this field, but for a layman like me and for the best in the field too. Thank you so much, sir. At this instance, we would like to felicitate the committee members for their sheer dedication and zealous efforts at the hands of our eminent speaker, Sir Advocate Tushar Hemani, sir. Sir, I may request you to felicitate Advocate Harish Shah with a memento. Followed by CA Kunjal Mehta. Followed by Advocate Sunil Shah. Advocate K.H. Katharia. Advocate Deepesh Shakwala. Advocate Vasant Patel. And CA Piyush Panchal. Thank you so much, sir. Here we come to the end of the third technical session. I invite the dignitaries on the dais for a group photo session. So please come forward.